It started like any ordinary day in the lab. Bright fluorescent lights, the hum of machines, the faint smell of chemicals, and the steady rhythm of my heartbeat as I prepared my project for the science fair. I had always been obsessed with genetics, fascinated by the secrets locked in DNA strands, the invisible codes that defined life itself. This project was supposed to be a breakthrough, my ticket to recognition, awards, and maybe even a scholarship, but I never imagined it would rewrite my own life literally. I remember the precise moment everything shifted. I had been working late, alone, eyes strained from staring at the microscope. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the pipette, carefully transferring samples. Every precaution had been followed, or so I thought. Then a sudden flicker of the fluorescent lights caused a minor spark in the equipment. A faint hiss, a chemical odor, and in that instant, a wave of light and energy enveloped me. My vision blurred, a searing warmth raced through my veins, and the world tilted violently. When I opened my eyes, the lab was the same, yet nothing felt familiar. My hands, they weren't mine. Or rather, they looked like mine, but delicate, softer, and smaller. I scrambled toward the mirror in the lab, heart pounding, mind racing, every rational thought evaporating. The reflection staring back at me was different. My face had shifted, subtle curves forming where there had been none, my jawline softening, my features smoothing into something I barely recognized. Panic gripped me, but it was intertwined with a strange, alien curiosity. Could this be real? Was this some hallucination, a trick of the brain, or had the experiment really changed me at the genetic level? I touched my cheek, tracing the unfamiliar contours, feeling the warmth and softness that was undeniably new. My chest heaved. I could hardly breathe through the mixture of terror and wonder. The next moments were a blur of frantic thoughts. How could this have happened? I had been careful, meticulous, always following protocols. Could a simple miscalculation, a tiny spark, really have altered my DNA? My mind raced through scientific principles, theoretical possibilities, and the impossible reality reflected in the mirror. Every instinct screamed at me to escape, hide, and seek help. But who would believe this? Who could explain this scientifically without sounding insane? I stumbled toward my workstation, scanning every detail, retracing my steps. The sample vials, the computer logs, the equipment, all appeared normal, yet I felt irreversibly changed. A quiet voice in my head whispered of the unknown. This is no accident. This is a doorway. I shivered. Could I reverse it? Or was this my new reality? By the time I made it to the bathroom, the changes had intensified. Even my voice, when I whispered to myself, was no longer the one I had known. It carried softness, melody, a tonal shift that was both strange and unnerving. Every movement felt foreign. The sway of my hips, the tilt of my shoulders, even the way my hands rested on the sink was unfamiliar yet mesmerizing. Fear and fascination warred inside me, leaving me breathless, staring at a reflection that was both me and not me. I tried to sit, to ground myself, to rationalize, but even the act of sitting felt different. Muscles I had never known were engaged. My balance shifted in ways that made each motion a delicate negotiation. The more I observed myself, the more I realized that this wasn't temporary. My DNA had changed, yes, but the ripple of that change affected every aspect of my physical presence, my voice, my mannerisms. I was inhabiting a body that was both alien and intimately mine. The hours that followed were filled with a strange mix of panic, disbelief, and cautious exploration. I traced the contours of my face, studied the shift in muscle tone, experimented with posture, and even touched my hair, longer, softer, and entirely unfamiliar. Each movement sent a shiver through me. I could feel curiosity creeping in, mingling with fear, whispering that maybe this wasn't just a catastrophe, but an opportunity to explore something beyond ordinary human experience. By evening, I realized that my reflection wasn't going to revert on its own. The science experiment had irreversibly changed me. The lab was silent, except for the hum of machines that now seemed like background to a personal revelation. I sat on the cold floor, clutching my notebook, jotting down observations in a mix of scientific curiosity and personal terror. What had I become? Could I navigate this world in this new form? And most importantly, could I reclaim control over a life that now felt like someone else's story as much as my own? Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every shadow, every sound in the apartment felt heightened, as though the world itself had shifted along with me. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, mind racing, acutely aware that tomorrow would demand navigation of a life I hadn't chosen. A life defined not by choice, but by a single shocking miscalculation in a science project gone wrong. Sunlight spilled across my room, warm and almost accusing, as if the day itself demanded I face this new reality. I swung my legs over the bed, feeling the unfamiliar weight of my chest and the subtle sway of my hips. Every motion reminded me that nothing about me was the same. Even standing felt like learning the body all over again. Balance, posture, the rhythm of walking, everything required conscious effort. In the bathroom I caught my reflection and froze. My face had softened overnight, my jawline smoother, my cheeks higher, my lips fuller. My hair tumbled past my shoulders in silky waves, brushing against my collarbone. I ran my fingers through it, the sensation alien yet intimate. The realization hit me with a quiet punch. This was permanent. My DNA, my body, my identity, everything had shifted and there was no going back. Every movement was a study in awareness. Reaching for the towel, brushing my teeth, even the way I adjusted my posture. Each action felt amplified, exaggerated, new. I felt eyes on me that weren't there, as if the mirror itself was judging how naturally I could inhabit this form. Panic coiled in my stomach, but beneath it, a flicker of curiosity began to glow. Leaving the house, the world reacted instantly. Passers-by glanced longer than expected, some with curiosity, some with subtle amusement. The weight of their attention pressed on me, but it also forced focus. Every step, every gesture, every tilt of my head carried meaning I hadn't needed to manage before. Walking became a negotiation between fear, observation, and a strange, growing confidence. At school, everything escalated. Friends froze mid-sentence, eyes wide, unsure how to address me. Teachers cast subtle glances, whispering to each other in quiet confusion. Hallways, once mundane, now felt like a runway under a spotlight. Every movement, my hands, my shoulders, even the way I carried my backpack, was being measured, interpreted, dissected. I learned quickly that blending in was no longer possible. Lunchtime was a challenge. Sitting at the table, I could feel every pair of eyes, every whisper brushing past me. I ate slowly, deliberately, adjusting gestures to appear natural. Laughing required careful calibration. Even smiling carried weight I hadn't anticipated. Small victories, responding to a joke without faltering, holding eye contact, navigating conversation, felt monumental. As the day stretched on, I began to notice subtle patterns. People's reactions weren't just threatening, they were informative. Smiles, nods, glances, they taught me how I was perceived. I experimented with small adjustments. A tilt of the head, a softer laugh, a shift in posture. Each change subtly altered the response, and I realized I could learn to navigate this new world, to shape perception and even influence interactions. By the time I returned home, exhausted but alive, I understood something fundamental. This wasn't just a nightmare to endure. This body, this identity carried power. Fear still lingered, yes, but beneath it was possibility. A chance to explore, understand, and even embrace this life I hadn't chosen but could learn to master. Alone in my room, the world outside suddenly felt distant, irrelevant. The chaos of reactions, whispers, and stares faded into the background. For the first time, I could move freely, experiment, and explore without judgment. Standing in front of the mirror, I studied myself with an intensity that felt almost scientific. Every curve, every line, every detail of this altered body was fascinating, frightening, and oddly beautiful. I began with posture. Sitting, standing, walking, I had to relearn every motion. The sway of my hips, the tilt of my shoulders, the way my arms hung naturally, all required conscious adjustment. At first, movements were awkward, uncoordinated, but slowly, small corrections created a rhythm. I spun lightly, watched the way the fabric of my clothes fell, and felt the subtle elegance of balance I had never noticed before. Clothes became a playground. Dresses, skirts, blouses, items I had only worn experimentally or admired from a distance, took on a new intimacy. I slid a dress over my body, the fabric smooth against my skin. I turned slowly, letting the mirror reflect every angle. The sensation was thrilling and terrifying. I felt exposed yet powerful, vulnerable yet in control. Shoes came next. High heels, delicate and unfamiliar, forced me to focus, to find rhythm, to adapt. Each step, at first clumsy, gradually became confident. With every stride, I felt a small victory, a proof that I could inhabit this new form naturally. Makeup opened an entirely new dimension. Foundation, blush, eyeshadow, and lipstick became tools of expression, each stroke revealing subtle power and emotion. Blending, contouring, highlighting, every brushstroke was a study of identity. My eyes, accentuated, seemed more expressive. My lips, shaped and colored, conveyed moods I hadn't imagined. I practiced small expressions, a tilt of the head, a glance of the eyes, a faint smile. Each movement transformed not just my reflection but how I felt inside. Voice was next. Speaking aloud felt strange. My new tone, softer, melodic, carried a weight of femininity I had never used. I practiced reading aloud, whispering, even humming. Listening to myself, I realized how much identity was tied to sound. I experimented with intonation, cadence, and pitch, learning subtle control over how I projected emotion, confidence, or curiosity. Gestures and small movements became essential. A flick of the wrist, the curve of fingers, the tilt of my head. These small elements carried enormous weight. I experimented endlessly in front of the mirror, noting which gestures felt natural, which conveyed elegance, and which exposed vulnerability. Each motion taught me something new about inhabiting this body fully. Curiosity mingled with fear. There were moments of embarrassment, of staring too long at my reflection, of feeling overwhelmed by the alien familiarity of my own body. But there were also moments of delight, discovering subtle strengths in posture, elegance in movement, and the thrill of mastering something profoundly unfamiliar. I began creating small personas. One moment playful, flirtatious, laughing softly at my own reflection. Another moment introspective, serious, contemplative. Each persona revealed hidden aspects of myself, strengths and vulnerabilities, confidence and insecurity. Experimenting with these aspects taught me how identity could be fluid yet cohesive, and how each layer could interact with the world around me. Journaling became a ritual. Every observation, sensation, and emotional response went on the page. The subtle swell of confidence, the sharp pang of anxiety, the thrill of a successfully executed gesture. Reading back, patterns emerged. I was learning, adapting, and discovering that this identity, once terrifying, carried potential for growth, expression, and even empowerment. Hours passed unnoticed. The apartment, once ordinary, became a laboratory of transformation. Each step, each experiment, each reflection in the mirror built awareness and skill. By nightfall, I felt a shift, a quiet confidence that I could navigate this body, understand its nuances, and prepare to step back into the public world with some degree of control. Lying on the bed later, exhausted but exhilarated, I understood a crucial truth. This wasn't simply a body or a reflection. This was an opportunity. A doorway into exploring self-expression, identity, and confidence on a level I had never imagined. Fear was still there, yes, but it had transformed. Curiosity, excitement, and a subtle, simmering empowerment had taken its place. Stepping outside felt different now. The world had always been familiar, predictable, but walking down the streets in this new body was like entering an entirely new dimension. Every glance, every whisper, every passing smile carried weight. I had learned privately to inhabit this body, but now the test was real, public, unfiltered, and undeniable. The first few steps were cautious. I adjusted my posture, the sway of my hips, the rhythm of my stride. People glanced at me, some curious, some admiring, others confused. But I realized quickly that I could control more than just my movements. I could control energy, presence, and confidence. Each step forward was a negotiation and assertion. I exist, I am here, I am valid. In the cafe, I practiced subtle social maneuvers. Ordering coffee, I experimented with tone, gestures, and eye contact. The barista smiled genuinely, and I felt a small thrill. It wasn't just recognition. It was interaction, acknowledgement, and a proof that this identity could function seamlessly in public. Each nod, each glance, each soft laugh built momentum. I began to enjoy the delicate dance of perception and presentation. Shopping became another arena of exploration. Clothing, accessories, and even small gestures offered new ways to express self. Trying on outfits, I felt the transformation extend beyond the physical. Confidence began to swell as I noticed how subtle changes, shoulders back, chin up, a slight tilt of the head, altered how people responded. Compliments arrived in whispers, smiles, or lingering glances, each one reinforcing the growing understanding that this body, this identity, was powerful in ways I had never anticipated. Interpersonal interactions became lessons. A casual conversation with a stranger, a shared laugh in a shop, even navigating crowded streets, all required attention, awareness, and subtle calibration. I experimented with voice, tone, and posture, noting which gestures felt natural, which expressions commanded warmth, and which reactions sparked curiosity or admiration. Each successful interaction was a small victory, proof that I could navigate the world gracefully and effectively. The thrill was intoxicating. I began taking risks, slightly bolder outfits, more pronounced expressions, playful gestures. Each risk carried anxiety, yes, but also exhilaration. I discovered that confidence was contagious. Projecting self-assurance subtly influenced reactions around me. The world was no longer intimidating. It was responsive, dynamic, and alive with possibilities. Of course, challenges persisted. Awkward stares, lingering attention, and unexpected questions tested patience and poise. A misstep in conversation or movement reminded me that mastery required practice, observation, and resilience. Yet even these moments became opportunities to adapt, to refine, to learn the nuances of social perception and self-expression. By evening, exhaustion mingled with satisfaction. Every interaction, every step, every glance had contributed to a growing mastery of my new identity. I walked home with a sense of accomplishment I hadn't anticipated. The fear that had once dominated now coexisted with excitement and empowerment. This body, once terrifying and alien, was now a vessel of influence, expression, and self-discovery. At home, I reflected in the mirror. The curves, the gestures, the expressions, they were mine to control, mold, and express. I smiled softly, realizing that the true transformation wasn't just physical. It was internal. Understanding, confidence, mastery, and the joy of inhabiting a self that had been inaccessible before. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm of discovery and mastery. I moved through public spaces with awareness, navigated social interactions with subtlety, and experimented endlessly with expression, posture, and presentation. Each encounter was a lesson, each reaction a guide. And with each small success, the identity that had once terrified me now felt natural, empowering, exhilarating. By the time I returned home each day, I was exhausted, yet alive with excitement. The fear of exposure had shifted to curiosity, exploration, and subtle pride. I had learned that empowerment came not from hiding, but from inhabiting fully, from engaging with the world bravely and gracefully. Looking back in the mirror, I understood finally. The DNA change, the transformation, the identity, it had forced me into a world I never would have entered voluntarily. And in that world, I had discovered something extraordinary. Courage, self-awareness, confidence, and the ability to navigate life with both elegance and power. The body was different, yes, but the self I had uncovered within it was stronger, bolder, and more alive than ever. This wasn't just survival. It was mastery. It was discovery. It was empowerment. And as I stepped outside again, every glance, every interaction, every moment was a reminder. I had entered a world that wasn't mine, and in doing so I had found a self I never knew existed.